The first time I've run for office, over 1 million people and rising, voting for me to take this incredible state.
He dares to run for California's higher office, the office of governor.
It might take some time to figure out where this is going. We're going to wait till every ballot is counted. We're going to give democracy a time to work, and we know we finished really strong.
All right, welcome in. This is Right Now Here. We are, again, just the day after, of course, we saw that polls in person were crowded with lines, people waiting to cast their ballot in the June primary election. This is Right Now, streaming on the CBS 8 app. I'm Chris Gros. Jack Hole joined with me, and we are going to go through the very top races, the candidates, how it is that they're looking at a lot of these early results, and then we're also going to be joined by our pair of political analysts that we had a great conversation yesterday. Very excited to have Laura Fink and Wendy Patrick back in studio today. You could see the copious amounts of coffee, water, notes, laptops, all the screens. Probably going to have to use some blue eye glasses here in a little bit after we get done with this. But let's recap who the top candidates were heading into last night. Let's go through what we see right now.
Yeah, so here we go. These are the Republicans that were at the top of the race. Remember, there was a concern among Democrats that it was going to be a Republican versus a Republican early on in this campaign a few months ago, of course, with former Fox News contributor Steve Hilton, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco. On the Democratic side, you have Javier Becerra, billionaire Tom Steyer, former Congresswoman Katie Porter, San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan, and former LA Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. Chris, let's get right into it. Let's break down these results.
All right, as you can see right there at the top of the list here in the race for governor so far, we have Republican Steve Hilton with 27.8% of the vote, followed by Javier Becerra at a little bit more than 25% of the vote. Democrat Tom Steyer trailing there just with about 20% of the vote if we were rounding up. Republican Sheriff Chad Bianco, Riverside County at 11%. And then we have Congresswoman Katie Porter there who also dropped out of the running, essentially, the race there, along with Antonio Villaraigosa and Matt Mahan. Some other Democratic hopefuls who, again, when they saw those initial results, decided that, again, the math just simply was not adding up for them. So, as we said, we have Wendy Patrick here in our studio, as well as Laura Fink, our News 8 political contributor. So, guys, I guess we'll start with this. We saw the numbers. What were your initial reactions? Laura, we'll start with you, and then Wendy, I want to get your reactions as well, too.
Well, after all of the drama, this was a real normal election for California. We see a Republican heading in with strong support, consolidated support, endorsed by the Republican president. And we see a moderate Democrat, institutional Democrat, has held multiple positions, including Attorney General of the great state of California, both moving forward. This was not a sweeping change election. This wasn't really an outsider's election. This was something where the laws of political gravity really did apply.
And Wendy, for you, I mean, you see the performance that Steve Hilton was able to put up, but I think Laura made a good point there, where this does appear to be somewhat of a normal election in that we've had Governor Gavin Newsom here in office for so long. I think a lot of people forget about the power of an incumbent, and when you have that wide open Democratic field, it's not uncommon to see a Republican with consolidated support at the top of a primary.
Yeah, you have totally different dynamics when you don't have an incumbent. And the reason I say it's a wide open field is that it's often like a Wild West in terms of candidates. We had 61 people on the ballot. But when you think about the front runners, we always knew who the front runners were. But even in a race like this, you had some significant changes. Remember early on, you had both Bianco and Steve Hilton, the front runners, two Republican front runners in a deep blue state. Fast forward to Eric Swalwell dropping out of the race. All of a sudden, Becerra shoots to the top of the ticket, and people thought, who is this? Mm-hmm. Despite him having held prestigious positions in the past, he was so low-key, perhaps to his detriment. But, voters saw him as safe, so he garnered a lot of support. But even he was passed over by Steve Hilton coming into the final stretch. Those dynamics, and that's a great horse race, isn't it? That's the kind of thing you go to the park to watch, and you think, oh my gosh, I never would have seen that coming. You don't see that normally if you have an incumbent. So that's one of the things that made last night so interesting and also caused people to clutch their ballots until the very last minute.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of ballots to be counted, and that's something we're going to take a look at. What's great about today is we actually have numbers to go off of instead of projections. But just for the sake of comparison, I do want to bring up the poll that we were talking about yesterday. This is from last week. This is an Emerson College poll, and maybe do a little bit of compare and contrast, most specifically when it comes to Tom Steyer. Right there, you see Javier Becerra at 28%. Hilton and Steyer tied at 23%. One of the things that we were talking about is, what is this potential two-headed race going to be? Is it going to be Becerra Steyer? Is it going to be Hilton Becerra? Based off of the early numbers that we're getting right now, it looks like it is more likely at this moment for Becerra and Steve Hilton to be the two that we're voting on in November. But it is a long process when it comes to counting votes. At our last number, to bring it up here one more time, I believe it is 58% of the votes that have been counted. So we still got a long ways to go. This could go into Thursday. This could go into Friday before we start to get something clearer here. But if you're Tom Steyer right now, what are you looking for to potentially leapfrog Hilton or leapfrog Becerra to get in? Is it, in your opinion, over, or is it just the odds are just getting longer and longer as every vote gets counted?
Jack, I love that you respect the process and that every vote needs to be counted. And so I'll do what you as a news person cannot do and say that it's a long shot for Steyer at this point. The numbers, the gap's just too big. And like, while that, I'd be happy to eat my words and to have him overcome the odds, but they are long odds. And to borrow from Wendy's racetrack analogy, what voters had to make a tactical decision, both on the Republican and the Democratic side. And we see that more and more. So Tom Steyer was facing a field where the Democratic vote was split. Like, so even that 5% going to Katie Porter, that 5% going to Matt Mahan, those are percentage points that cannot come and consolidate behind Steyer. Whereas if they had dropped out of the race, he would have had more of a shot. So just the math was really hard for him. It shows us the limits of what money can buy, and it also shows the trustworthiness and the sort of the gravitational pull of Javier Becerra, which I don't think anyone could have predicted. Although there's going to be some analysts smart out there saying I called it and I knew Javier was the way. There really was a seismic event with the dropout, the absence of Kamala Harris, and then the dropping out of Eric Swalwell, and it all happened very, very fast. And so I don't, that fantasy of, and I probably said something about it yesterday. That fantasy of having like top two Democrats for Democrats is something that's very hard to pull off, especially in an open primary where everybody's competitive.
Now, I do want to ask about Steyer, because I think that he does represent this, what some would say an issue. Some would say that, hey, he's a billionaire who's called for taxes on billionaires, but big money getting into politics, record amount of money being spent in a primary in which he is all but likely to finish third. This is someone who spent a lot of money to run for president, who finished far worse in that race as well too. What is this a good thing for politics, that someone who spends this type of money is not seeing results? Is it a good sign that someone with this type of money continues to inject themselves into politics? How do you square away the sort of case of a Tom Steyer, if you will?
Yeah, we sometimes see billionaires running in these very high-profile elections. Tom Steyer is a repeat candidate. He has run several times for very high elected office, including president in 2020, and has never been elected, doesn't have that experience. So the question becomes, is it worth his while to spend all this money to draw attention to issues that he views as important? Because there are lots of people that probably would like to see billionaires taxed, more money in the economy, but those billionaires will vote with their feet. They'll leave whatever state is imposing those taxes, and so it really will backfire. They probably have other homes and other options, much more than the rest of us do. But is it viable to begin with? I would say it could be if the issues that the money is being spent on are issues that would improve the lives of everyone, of every citizen, whether you're Democrat or Republican. We're looking at those redrawn districting maps of California, where now there's a lot more blue than there was previously before Prop 50. It doesn't matter whether you're blue or red. You need a place to live. You need a decent healthcare system. You want income. You want fair income. You want safe streets so you can send your children to school. There are so many issues far more that unite us than divide us. For Tom Steyer to answer Jack's question, it's over. And he knows that too, because listen to how gracious he was in his speech. He said we made a significant difference, and he was very pleased with how they played. Not that he thought he was going to win.
Yeah, it did feel a little reflective, as
Yes.
that perhaps something was being concluded. Laura, I want to ask you a question about the Republican side. One of the things you said yesterday was you're going to ask your dad who you voted for, or who he voted for, whether it was Hilton or Bianco. I think taking a look at the numbers right now, I think Hilton is probably the better bet right now, right?
Well, I mean, I haven't talked to him because I was here all night, but and he's more of a Hilton kind of guy, just as to go on the record. He's a mainstream Republican, a centrist Republican, so that would make more sense.
To add on to it, it seemed like that was the case. It was an impressive performance. I think I had a couple of my friends who were Democrats send me texts and saying, "I'm looking at this map and I'm seeing a lot of red." That is something that's concerning me as a Democrat. One of the things, though, that I was reading this morning that I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this, is despite the strong performance from Steve Hilton, Republican turnout remains consistent with other losing campaigns that we've seen here throughout the state. If you were to combine Hilton and Bianco's numbers together, that total, it's roughly 38 to 40. That's consistent with President Trump's 2024 performance and other losing campaigns for governor here in the state. So I want to wonder, do the current dynamics pose an opportunity to change that trend? Is this the cap of Republican support or just general election support someone like Steve Hilton could get? Or is there an opportunity to expand that demographic as we head into the November election?
There's always opportunity, and this is the thing, because I'll be the one to say he's a long shot. This is Javier Becerra's race to lose, and it's not even close by the numbers. His window of opportunity in his lane is extremely narrow. That said, what is he going to do with it? He's going to be wildly well-funded. He's going to have Republican loyalty. He's going to have national money behind him. What can he do with that? Where's the math there? And now, we saw the last successful Republican candidate was in a special election in Arnold Schwarzenegger. He had a little bit better math because of the turnout and that special election status. But what can Steve Hilton do with what? And that's what you have to do when you run a campaign. What do I have to do? How do I appeal to voters? I think he can really shake up this race from a message capacity. Like, this is someone who understands the power of communication and media, and he can really challenge Javier Becerra in a way that previous candidates on the Republican ticket the last couple of cycles hasn't been able to do. I think he can also carry congressional candidates across the finish line potentially. If Republicans and conservative-leaning independents have something to go and vote for, they're going to say, you know what, I was disappointed, I'm upset about the economy, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, I don't see anything on the Democratic side that's for me, but I'm going to stay home. Well, Steve Hilton might give them a reason to go to the polls and not only vote for him, but that swing congressional district that they might have. So that's the math that everybody's doing. It's so funny that all the voters are, and I hear Wendy talking about the issues, and I'm like, Wendy, why aren't you running? And then I also think, well, we're all now little political consultants with our ballot, and I have my friends calling me up and want to vote tactically to make sure their vote counts. And it's such an interesting era of politics as we all try to game the system and make sure that our vote is productive beyond the issues and the personalities of the people on the ballot.
I do want to ask about one more candidate who seemingly did not sort of catch fire, and either two of you or both of you can weigh in here, and that would be Matt Mahan, the San Jose mayor, who sort of came in as a Democrat who there were talks of changes to how it is that California operates. I would venture to say Javier Becerra represents maybe, again, kind of strengthening the current system versus outright change, but you did hear ideas of potential change, obviously being on stage and saying that that he would suspend the gas tax, some other things representing San Jose, which he feels like has been a good example of what different types of leadership in the Democratic Party. And then before we do talk about the LA mayor, I do want to talk about Spencer Pratt. That sort of is a microcosm of what there has been, this sort of prevailing theory that people are sort of upset with how things go in Sacramento. So how is it that someone like a Matt Mahan, despite that maybe as a candidate he was not electable and so forth, but is that idea that people are sort of upset with the bureaucracy of Sacramento, is that still something that we're going to see take place in the general election? Is that something that Steve Hilton can capitalize on? I know that that's sort of like a multifaceted question, and I'm just sort of talking out of my mouth right now, but it does feel like there was a sense of, in a number of these races, that people are sort of upset at the status quo. and yet the person who is likely going to be taking the Democratic, seat there for the general election is Javier Becerra, kind of represents that. So how do we square that away?
Well, first of all, as a lawyer, I'm going to object to the compound nature
The
of
compound
the
question,
And, so I'm
and
gonna pick
terrible
choose
journalistic
what to
question
answer.
is, by the way,
I'm
too.
kidding.
Like my journalism professor is probably watching this saying,
Actually, I would also argue you tied it together in a neat way and put a bow on it. So I do understand everything you're asking, and I think that Matt, I thought it was great that he was a candidate. He was a good-looking, well-spoken, mild-mannered. I loved his demeanor during both debates. He didn't get a lot of airtime, so he didn't have as much opportunity to put his foot in his mouth as the others. But I also think that when you compare him to somebody like Spencer Pratt was not mild-mannered. He was a firebrand, and he was very outspoken. He's a reality TV star. He's used to the spotlight. But I would also, in that sense, liken him to Steve Hilton, who's also comfortable in front of the camera. Steve Hilton did marvelously in the debates because he was unflappable in the hot seat. You got to keep a cool head. And that's part of what I think matters to voters as well. You don't want somebody that's going to either lose it on stage or even behind the scenes. Remember what happened to Katie Porter. You want somebody that has the judgment, the demeanor, the wherewithal, the compassion, the kindness, and the relatability that makes them likable. Because if you're likable, you're electable. So putting all that together, I'm not surprised that you have Steve Hilton and Spencer Pratt that did as well as they did. I am surprised, given that same rationale, Matt Mahan didn't do better than he did.
I guess that's a better way of phrasing my question, that considering where we've seen some people who have sort of represented, I want to shake up the status quo, someone like Matt Mahan who represented that, maybe it was the attacks of the Silicon Valley funding. What do you think was the difference, Laura, for someone like a Matt Mahan who just didn't seem to punch through with voters? That
you articulated his issues and his platform very, very well, and it just wasn't where the voters were at.
Okay.
Like they're frustrated with Sacramento, but they're not. That wasn't the primary thing that they were looking for. They were looking for a Trump fighter, and they were looking for stability. And I'm as surprised as anybody when I was looking, and specifically at the LA mayor's race, which I think is kind of a microcosm. When you looked at Spencer Pratt voters, they were less concerned about affordability. They were less concerned about more affordable homes being built in their neighborhoods. Not just affordable, like rent-controlled homes, but just homes that were more affordable and as entry-level places. They were their issues of concern. They wanted public safety. So I think that's the challenge, is that Matt Mahan went forward with this idea of like, I'm anti the system, which in a different cultural moment voters could have related to. Because I think obviously we all are a little frustrated with the system, but that wasn't the primary thing that voters were punching the ticket on this year. So, and I always joke around because people have to feel out their moment. Like, you might be the right candidate at the wrong time. I think it'll be interesting to see what he does next, because he has a compelling message, because the voters of San Jose like him. They like that he challenges the status quo, and they like that he gets stuff done. And I think that is a frustration across the board, that we're not seeing enough progress and action. And people on the left feel that, and people on the right feel that, and that was so. I want people to think about that when they look at candidates. On the opposite end of that, clearly it was Javier Becerra's moment, which even he couldn't have predicted. Right. So the sort of this, it's better to be lucky and smart and have the wind at your back in strange ways. And I think everyone that is elected has that. From our, pick your favorite politician, pick your least favorite politician, and they have had that when they came to power.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for saving me on that very long-winded question.
It was a great question. It really was a good question.
And you make a good point. It very well could be the Becerra moment. I wanted to ask about what we could expect from a Becerra-Hilton general election, but I like how you maybe said the quiet part out loud about a long shot on there. So I want to rephrase the question and maybe in turn pose a more interesting question. I think about the campaign finances from the National Republican Party and what that's going to look like in this election. While it might not be it might not be the most smart investment to pour so much money into a campaign like Hilton, we do know that Republicans are going to be putting a lot of money in a lot of races, because it is going to be competitive in a lot of places that perhaps they didn't expect it going in. I'm thinking right off the top of my head, Texas, North Carolina, Maine, Alaska, perhaps even Ohio, whether that's the governor's race or a Senate race. A lot of contested races where Democrats believe they have more than a puncher's chance to make an impact, make a splash, perhaps flip a seat. When it comes to the finances of it, do you think that this is a race that could potentially take resources away from other races throughout the country that perhaps Republicans should be paying attention to?
Well, I can't do the campaign math, but Republicans are drowning in funding. So it's almost like they can afford to spend a little. And the argument for investing in Steve Hilton's campaign is that you control the issue environment in California. So when you think about a Fox News, say, and they are talking, and you turn it on, and they are talking about like fire and brimstone, crime and immigration, and are sort of turning up the volume on those issues, that impacts the candidates in their districts and the people that are responding to it. I think that Hilton has an opportunity to really pick the issues that congressional races across the country are talking about, but specifically in California, that people have to answer for. He understands media, he understands the platform, and he will have that privilege to try to get it be another arm. So you know what? Instead of talking about housing and affordability and the economy, which Republicans right now are not doing well on, we're going to make it about crime. We're going to make it about immigration. We're going to make it about these other things. So he has the opportunity to do that. That's an investment that Republicans may think about making, where it's sort of asymmetrical. Like it sounds like, oh, but he's going to lose. Well, maybe he's going to lose, but maybe your down ticket candidates are going to win because they get to talk about the things that they want.